Thank you for joining me today. It's Brian Gubernick, and welcome to the No Days Off podcast, where we believe that every single day brings a new opportunity to get better. What if, as a business owner, as an entrepreneur, what if every meeting you ran and every decision you made and every mistake you committed, what if all of that was open for everyone on your team to see and question and dissect? For most leaders, the thought of what I just described sounds terrifying. But for Ray Dalio, who we were just talking about a week or so ago, for Ray Dalio, the founder of Bridgewater Associates, which is one of the largest hedge funds in the world, that's Ray's entire operating system. He calls it radical transparency. Today, I want to break down what radical transparency is really all about, what it means, how Ray Dalio built it into Bridgewater's culture, and why you might want to consider weaving some radical transparency into your business and into your leadership. So let's start first by really defining what radical transparency means. At its core, radical transparency means nothing is hidden. Information, feedback, even criticism, they're all shared openly. The idea is that when everyone has access to the same information, better decisions get made and trust is actually strengthened. In Ray Dalio's own words, he says, truth and transparency are the essential foundations for a great relationship. Radical transparency is not about being cruel. It's just about being very, very clear. It's the opposite, I would say, of the traditional corporate culture. The culture where leaders tend to hoard information and employees are then left to kind of whisper behind closed doors. At Bridgewater, at Ray Dalio's company, there are no closed doors. So Ray runs this system, this radical transparency system at Bridgewater. He's institutionalized radical transparency. Here's what it looks like in practice. And this is drawn from Ray's book called Principles, one of my favorites, worth reading if you haven't seen that one. But he talks about this concept of radical transparency in his book and in many other places. Here's what it looks like in practice. First, every meeting is recorded. Almost every single meeting is recorded, and they're made available to employees. So people don't just see the outcomes of meetings anymore. When you publish the recording, they actually can see how the decisions were made. So whether you were in that meeting or not does not matter. Yes, traditional meetings like in a company, you hear about the outcomes, but in Ray's company, you actually get to watch, if you so choose, how the decisions were made. Next, Ray has this program he calls a dot collector. It's a dot collector tool. And what this tool does, it allows employees, this is crazy, but it's what he does. It allows employees to rate each other in real time during meetings. Rate on things like clarity and logic and persuasiveness. And then these scores are fed into a broader kind of baseball card of each person's strengths and weaknesses. Ray and the company could leverage this information to figure out maybe who's a better person to make a specific decision based on the topic or whatever's going on. Next, Bridgewater uses a lot of direct feedback. Employees are expected to give and they're expected to receive candid feedback constantly. They'll hear things like, hey, you handled that poorly, or you're not listening, or you're missing key logic. And again, it's not to be rude. It's actually required if you are in fact going to participate in meetings and make decisions at Bridgewater. Again, direct feedback, no sugarcoating. And then lastly, maybe what Ray is best known for is this meritocracy of ideas that he pushes for. The best argument wins, not the most senior title, which again is different than a lot of companies. The best argument wins, not the most senior title. If an intern has a better point than a, say, managing director, The intern's idea carries weight. Ray Dalio himself would say that radical transparency is pretty uncomfortable because it strips away ego. But it's that discomfort that forces truth up to the surface. Now, why does Ray Dalio insist on radical transparency? Well, because in his world, which is a world in which he's investing billions of dollars, when you make bad decisions in that world, they could be deadly. And so Ray believes the only way to avoid them is to make sure reality is confronted head on without filters that, intentionally or unintentionally are created oftentimes. Most companies fail because people protect egos instead of pursuing truth. Think about that. Most companies fail because people protect egos instead of pursuing truth, because they hide mistakes and they soften their criticism and they avoid hard conversations. Well, Bridgewater, Ray's company, flips that on its head. But let's be honest here. I think it's important, right? We got to recognize radical transparency is pretty damn hard. Many people aren't ready to be told exactly what others think of them every single day. Many leaders aren't ready to hear it themselves. It requires a thick skin. It requires a lot of humility. And it, of course, requires a commitment to truth above comfort. That's why many people thrive at Bridgewater and others run out the door, according to Ray. Now, I'm talking about radical transparency here today because I think that we should all consider it a little bit more. Now, I am suggesting you record every meeting, but am I saying that you should publicly rate every teammate? I don't know. Probably not. For most businesses, that level of intensity might do more harm than good. But the principle behind radical transparency is where I'm focusing. I think the principle of radical transparency is worth adopting. Stop hoarding information. We all are guilty of this to some extent. Stop hoarding the information. Share context with your people, with your team, so they can make better decisions. Normalize real feedback. Like, don't wait for the quarterly or the annual reviews. Build a culture where direct and timely feedback is the norm. Lastly, maybe consider rewarding truth and not always hierarchy. If the new agent, let's say on your team, spots a flaw in your plan, celebrate it. Don't punish them for maybe stepping out of line. See, radical transparency forces alignment between words and reality. And most businesses desperately need more of that. So here would be my challenge. I think first you got to audit your transparency. What do you keep hidden from your team right now? What do you keep hidden from your team that might actually help them if they knew it? So audit your transparency. Next, experiment with some radical candor. The next time someone drops the ball, give them some immediate, clear feedback. I'm not saying be rude. I'm just saying give them some immediate and very clear feedback and invite them to do the same for you, which I think is key. And then lastly, let the best idea win. In your next meeting, tell your team, hey, forget about your title, forget about your tenure here. We're going with the strongest logic. And then let's see what happens. Now, radical transparency certainly doesn't mean you have to copy Bridgewater's every move. As I already mentioned, I think it's pretty tough to do that. But I think it does mean you look hard at where a lack of transparency might be slowing you down, or worse, where it's leading you into some blind spots. Leadership really isn't about protecting your ego. It's about creating a culture where truth tends to come first, because oftentimes truth is the only way forward. Now, if you like what we're talking about here as we're wrapping up, please make sure you share this episode with a fellow leader, specifically a fellow leader who's willing to hear the truth. And let's start building more transparent organizations, at least one conversation at a time. That's all I have for you today, the No Days Off podcast. Thank you so much for listening. And remember, every single day brings a new opportunity to get better. So let's get after it.